Good afternoon. I'm glad you could join back with us this week. Just want to start out by saying, have you ever seen something awesome? I'm talking extremely awesome, take your breath away, crazy beautiful, wild. I've seen several things in my life. I've been very fortunate to have traveled and went places and got to see some pretty sights. One of my favorite views around here is Natural Bridge. I always go up to the top of the bridge, and it's just breathtaking how beautiful the view is. I've been in the St. Louis Arch. That was a good time. You got to see for miles and miles and miles. I've seen the monuments in Washington, D.C. They're beautiful and massive. I've kayaked to Cumberland Falls, seen a moonbow. That was pretty cool. I've seen the sugary beaches of the Gulf of Mexico, and we used to go every year. I don't know about this year, but I really miss them. They're beautiful. I've seen smoke come off the Smoky Mountains from the top of the Sky Bridge. And I've also seen how dark it is in Mammoth Cave and how beautiful the stalactites are that hang from the ceiling. I've seen a lot of beautiful things in my life and a lot of awesome things that take my breath away. But I would give all of it up to have been in the shoes of the disciples so that I could have seen the awesome things that Jesus did. Even for just one day is really all I would have needed. I think that would have been incredible. So today I kind of want to talk about Jesus. I want to kind of imagine that you're a disciple and we're going along with Jesus today as we investigate three of these things that happened in Jesus' ministry that would have really blown us away. We're going to start off in Matthew chapter 14. I'm going to read verses 15 through 21 for you. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them to me," he said, and he directed the people to sit down in the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 baskets full of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So think about this. Every time I sit down and think about this, I always ask the question, how did Jesus do this? How did Jesus pull this off? He took 5 loaves and 2 fish, and he fed 5,000 people. The ultimate answer is Jesus is Jesus. Jesus is the Lord. He can do whatever he wants. But I oftentimes try to imagine it myself as if I was a disciple there handing it out. And, did Christ break a piece off and hand it off, and then he go back and more bread was there? Did he reach down in the baskets and pull out more, and every time there was more to pull out? I don't know. I think that would have been really, really cool to have been there and seen that. But, again, imagine you're a disciple. Imagine every time you go back to Jesus, well, he's got more food. You take it and you go and you give it back to the people. And whenever it was all over, it says that they picked up 12 basketfuls. So where did all this food come from? It would have been incredible to have been there to witness that. And, something else really interesting about this that I read about is, it says that there are 5,000 men that were there, but if we give each man a wife and a child, that triples your amount. We go from 5,000 to 15,000. And to give you kind of an idea of how big of a crowd that would be, I looked up Estill County's census, and in 2019 we had 14,106 people living in the county. So theoretically, Jesus could have fed this entire county at this meeting. It would have been insane to have been there. Let's check out another story. So the disciples, they're all out in a boat in the middle of a lake, and that's where we pick up in Matthew chapter 14, verse 25. It says this, "Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw them walking out on the lake, they were terrified. 'It's a ghost,' they said, and cried out in fear." So imagine we're disciples. We're out in this boat in the middle of a lake. It's pouring the rain, the wind is blowing, we're scared to death, the boat is rocking around everywhere, and somebody looks up out on the water and sees a man walking towards us. I would be terrified. I would have lost it right there for sure. And they even thought that it was a ghost. They were all telling each other, it's got to be a ghost. It's got to be a spirit that's coming out here to us. And I would probably believe the same thing. I wouldn't know what to think. Let's finish up the scripture here. It says, but Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You have little faith, he said. Why did you doubt? And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Here comes Jesus, strolling on the water, picks up Peter as he's sinking, gets into the boat with the rest of the disciples, and makes the storm stop. Like I said, imagine being there. Imagine being in that boat, and it's storming, and it's scary, and it's awful, and Jesus gets in and just calms everything right down. He's Jesus. He's the Lord. I got one more story for us today. I'm going to set the story here. Mary and Martha had a brother. His name was Lazarus. And Lazarus was bad sick. We're going to read in John 11, verses 17 through 23. Whenever they tell Jesus that Lazarus is sick, he goes to him. And that's where we pick up right here. Verse 17 says, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. So think about this again. Imagine being a disciple again. Lazarus has been dead for 4 days now, whenever Jesus got there. They'd already put him in a tomb and everything. He was dead and gone. You can't say, well, he was asleep or he was in a coma or this or that. He'd been dead for 4 days now in a tomb. And like I said, let's finish up the verse here, but just imagine that you're a disciple. You're going into this situation. I'm going to read verse 38 through 44 here. It says, Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there's a bad odor, for he has been there for 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing there, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Being a disciple here would have been one of the craziest experiences anybody could have ever had. It would be similar to a funeral nowadays. A funeral where, you've got somebody and they've died and you're there and everybody's sad, everybody's upset, nobody knows really, you really don't have words to say. And Jesus rolls up, says, all right, wake up, come back to us. And the dead person takes a breath. I can't imagine being a disciple there and hearing a dead man take a breath and stand up and walk and talk with us. It would have removed any sort of doubt, any sort of thought or any shadow of a doubt that Jesus wasn't Lord. If I was with Jesus here, I would have believed long ago that he was Lord after all these miracles, but this would have been the icing on the cake for me. A man who can make a man come back to life, it would have been unfathomable. We look at all these awesome things that Jesus did, and we say that he's Lord and that he's great, but that means nothing if I don't follow him and I don't pursue him daily. I'm really thankful that the disciples were there to see this. Like I said, I would have loved to have seen it, but thank goodness that they wrote these things down so that we could know Jesus is awesome. And the fact of the matter is that Jesus is still awesome today. Jesus isn't here walking around with us, raising people back from the dead, but Jesus does miracles every day that, as long as we're open to looking at them and finding them, we know that he's still working today, and he's very powerful. But it's important, like I said, that we continue to follow Jesus and we continue to chase Jesus and know who he is by what he did, because he's coming back. The fact of the matter is Jesus has already defeated death, and whenever Jesus comes back, he's going to take us home with him, and that's going to be a good day. That'll be a day where we can actually be like the disciples and be there with Jesus. So it's important to keep on keeping on and remember that everything we do needs to glorify and praise Jesus. Until next time, we'll see you.